Hey, Madera friends. I'm Josh Haynes. I'm the Director of Community Impact, and if you're joining us for the first time, this is Touch Base, and it's actually Touch Base Season 3. We've done a couple of these seasons already, and we've done some different things. This one is going to make a little bit of a turn. We're going to do something a little bit different with this season. After talking with our CEO, Dave Gillis, and after talking to our Vice President of Human Resources, Rodney Cates, we want to offer you something over the next little bit, over the next few episodes that's a tad different. Rather than get in and do some investigating into different departments and this and that and whatever else, we actually want to do a little bit of equipping with you to hopefully help prepare you to be better at your jobs and better in your relationships. I don't know what you know about emotional intelligence, but that's what we're going to kind of tackle over the next several episodes. We're going to discuss the different facets of what emotional intelligence is, how it helps us, and then we're going to do some different interviews. Some of you may have studied this, some of you may have heard about this, others of you may have no idea what we're actually talking about when we say emotional intelligence. Wherever you are on that spectrum, it's okay. We're going to go ahead and just talk through it and kind of see where we're going. And so with that said, we're going to go ahead and jump into this. Imagine for just a moment, okay? Imagine for just a moment, and I know many of you are this way. You have worked really, really hard to get to where you are. There are very few people in the company that can do what you do. And there are very few people in this company that can do what you do as well as you do. And to be honest, you're pretty regularly praised for how well you do your work. But out of nowhere, this well-respected colleague bluntly attacks your work and your passions. This colleague seems to imply that you are just not as good at your job as you think you are, or maybe you're just not as good at your job as you used to be, and maybe even this industry, whatever industry you're in with the Madera companies, seems to have passed you by. This colleague begins to tell everybody that they can't believe how far you've fallen and really aren't quite sure what you bring to the table anymore. What do? How do you respond to that? Do you retaliate? Do you criticize this person? Do you become paralyzed? Do you start to look for another line of work? Do you start to figure out okay, maybe this company isn't for me, or definitely not this department? Maybe you lash out in anger. But is there another option? Would you consider just taking a step back and calmly responding to your employee, to the other employee, to your colleague? Would you consider just taking a step back and promising to get better, promising to do better? I think for a lot of us, that type of out-of-the-nowhere criticism would really kind of mess with us. We're not really quite sure maybe what we would do and how our emotions would run. This exact scenario actually happened to a man named Thomas Keller. Some of us may know that name, many of us probably don't, but he is a world-renowned chef. He's been championed by Anthony Bourdain, who has all sorts of television shows on the Travel Channel and on various cooking shows and different things like that. He has multiple restaurants across the nation. And Thomas Keller is the owner of Per Se, and it got crushed by a New York Times lead restaurant critic. This man's name is Pete Wells, and he did this in front of the entire city. After going to Thomas Keller's Per Se restaurant, Wells wrote in front of everybody again that the food was random, it was purposeless, it was rubbery, and it was flavorless. I am not a cook. I'm not really good at cooking most anything, but I know that's pretty awful. He actually dropped Per Se from being a 4-star restaurant, which is a phenomenal rating, to being a 2-star restaurant. What's crazy is just a couple of years previous to this, the New York Times had labeled Per Se as the best restaurant in New York City. Keller, for as famous as he was, could have responded in a host of ways, right? Had that happened to any of us, he could have been dismissive, he could have been angry, he could have done zero reflection, he could have gone to social media and basically bashed this man, Pete Wells. But instead, he did something else. On his own restaurant blog for Per Se, Keller wrote this: to all our guests, at all of our restaurants and our kitchens and dining rooms, we make every effort to provide you with the best possible experience. We consider it our professional responsibility to ensure that every one of you feels special and cared for. To us, it is imperative that we improve and evolve every day. We constantly examine ourselves, our menu, our service, and our standards. Regretfully, there are times when we do not meet those standards. The fact that the New York Times restaurant critic Pete Wells' dining experience at Per Se did not live up to his expectations and to ours is greatly disappointing to me and to my team. We pride ourselves on maintaining the highest standards, but we make mistakes along the way, and we are sorry that we let you down. We are not content resting on what we did yesterday. We believe we can do better for ourselves, our profession, and most importantly, our guests. We have the opportunity, the tools, the self-motivation, and the dedication to do so. And when we fall short, we will work even harder. We are confident that the next time you visit Per Se or any of our other restaurants, our team will deliver a most memorable experience. I find that story crazy, just to be honest with you, because I've been criticized for my works at different times. And sometimes it felt pretty unfair. And yet, this is an amazing, humble response, right? And maybe he did it for the PR, and maybe he did it for all sorts of other reasons, but at the same time, there has to be some level of emotional response here. I mean, we know criticism is hard, especially when you have to take criticism from people that you may not like, or especially if it's not delivered well or if it's overly harsh. And we can run from it, deflect it, ignore it, like I said, get angry or retaliate. Or we can choose to learn and grow from it. Learning and growing from it means that we have some level of understanding about ourselves, our strengths, our weaknesses, how we impact others. This is foundational for understanding emotional intelligence. And that's kind of where I want to take you, to give you a little bit of an understanding, a little bit of an introduction of what emotional intelligence is. It's often referred to as EQ, which means emotional quotient. It's the ability to balance thinking and or feeling for a greater decision-making process. Okay? It's the ability to balance your thinking and feeling to make great decisions. Daniel Goleman, who's kind of the father figure of emotional intelligence, says that success in life is 20% IQ, 20% intellectual intelligence, and 80% EQ. 80% of success in life is about being emotionally intelligent. And there are 5 facets, and these are the things we're going to tackle over the next several episodes, right? The first one is self-awareness. The second one is self-regulation. Then we're going to talk through motivation. We'll jump next to empathy, and then we will finish with social skills. And at each turn, I'm going to talk about it and then also bring in somebody else to come in and kind of interview them, talk them through what they see and all these different things. So what does it mean when we say emotional intelligence? Okay, here's what it means, all right? We manage our emotions, responding appropriately and with purpose, to intentionally think through the fullness of the situation. We learn to understand our emotions. We consider all of the factors that have led to how we or how others are feeling and acting. We recognize emotions with accuracy and humility. We watch for nonverbal signs like body language and facial expressions. I mean, many of you work on property. Many of you are discussing things with residents on a regular basis and recognizing what they're going through and seeing kind of all the things that you are, their body language and facial expressions and the tone of their voice. And sometimes they're upset and sometimes they're happy. I mean, all of this is a part of it, but then also knowing that you are also a human and you bring all of your emotions to work. Emotionally intelligent people are aware of their own emotional state, even and especially the negative feelings. And we're constantly learning from the various layers of those emotions. We're able to name the emotions. We're able to kind of put some words to it and then notice the connections between the actual emotion that I have and the situations that kind of start that emotion. And this leads us to being healthier and being able to understand how to communicate better with others, how to self-regulate. People who are emotionally intelligent are confidently self-aware, which is interesting, right? We're not talking arrogance. We're just talking they're confidently self-aware. Why? because they're realistic about themselves. They know their strengths, they know their weaknesses. They're able, like Thomas Keller, to receive criticism with humility, to own their mistakes, but yet they're not defined by or paralyzed by that failure. Emotionally intelligent people are gritty. Again, they're humble and they persevere. It's also interesting to take this into account, especially when we start thinking about how we have and deal with conflict sometimes, or how we deal with our impulses. Emotionally intelligent people are rarely hasty. They're not impulsive. They kind of have this steady emotional regulation. They take anger and anxiety and they're able to kind of bring it down a notch in order to reflect. And in some cases, when they see a situation that seems to be kind of getting out of hand, they are able to empathize and lighten the mood. They're tuned into their own emotions. They're sensitive to the emotional ups and downs of others, but they're not bullied by those emotions. Emotionally intelligent people know what empathy is. They understand it's essential for understanding others, for growing relationships, and responding with supportive and non-judgmental actions. And they understand and recognize that emotional intelligence is about self-improvement for greater impact. Now, just like there are all sorts of joys and successes for people who are emotionally intelligent, there are pitfalls for not having emotional intelligence. One of the things we talk about here at the Madera companies constantly is CANI, constant and never-ending improvement. And one of the things that's interesting about people who struggle with emotional intelligence is that their creativity and their innovation are stunted. They struggle to see a bigger picture. They're unable to see new solutions and possibilities for growth. Like we've talked about a little bit already, they deflect criticism, both the good and the bad. They create these unhealthy barriers that challenge their ability to have healthy relationships. And if you are in leadership or in some level of management, to be low in emotional intelligence means that we struggle to not just take criticism, but we struggle to deliver needed criticism to people for their healthy growth. Low emotionally intelligent people often use manipulation or deception. They hoard credit rather than passing it out and giving it to people, which only reveals their own insecurities and self-centered motivations. And oftentimes they're just too prideful to ask for help. They're too prideful to seek mentoring. They deflect the need for further education and often limit the influence of those from the outside. And they just surround themselves with yes people, those people that never really challenge you. They just kind of tell you, yes, whatever you think, that's great. And yet we know we need a little bit of push every now and then to challenge us. So here's what I want to just kind of finish with. One, I would tell you this: emotional intelligence can be cultivated and it can be learned, but it's going to take a little bit of effort on your part. You got to start by stopping. You got to think and determine, what are you feeling? Where's it coming from? And consider all of the outcomes before you actually act, especially when you start to feel those emotions bubbling up inside of you. Be intentional. Determine how best to direct your energy for building relationships, for problem solving, work-related matters and projects, especially so you can dedicate yourself to higher purposes. And then for those of us who struggle with the criticism and aren't really quite sure how to deal with it all the time, or just struggle with being challenged, I would just encourage you, resist the shame. Resist that desire sometimes to be paralyzed by it so that you can push through and be gritty about it. And recognize the outside influencers. And this is part of it. I remember having a boss tell me one time, he said, hey, you leave your junk at home. You leave your stuff that you're struggling with at the house. Don't bring that to work. And the truth of the matter is nobody can actually do that. We bring all of those things to our work. We bring our stresses from our personal life. We bring past hurts. We bring trauma. We bring all sorts of things. If there's a broken relationship we're working through, or one that we've had for a while, that stuff follows us to work. It follows us into these relationships. And so how do we navigate those types of things so that we can not just heal, but also be great employees and great teammates of one another? And so let me give you a few questions to consider. Think through for yourself. What is happening in me and around me that's impacting my ability to succeed at my job, in these relationships, and for bigger purposes? Do I have a person or people in my life who can help me understand my feelings, give me a little bit of wisdom, and invest in my development? And if If so, name these people. Tell them this is what you need from them. And if you don't, man, I would just encourage you to seek mentoring. Seek somebody who can be that, and we'll talk about this in future episodes, that kind of loving critic, that person that's always in your corner, but you can take some hard advice from. And do a little bit of reflection, because we do impact each other. How do people see you? How do people see me? Are there places, people where I need to make amends? And where do I need to grow both in EQ and IQ? Do I need some continued education? Do I need a further certification? Do I need to just humble myself and listen to my supervisor so that they can equip me further to be more successful in this job? There's all sorts of things here. Remember Daniel Goleman's comments. Success is 20% IQ. It's 20% intellectual intelligence, and it's 80% emotional intelligence. I look forward to this season. I look forward to seeing what we're going to do with this. And in the next episode, we're going to talk through self-awareness. What is self-awareness? How do we cultivate it? How do we run with it? And then we're going to get a chance to jump into one of our very first interviews with John McNelly, the Chief Marketing Officer for the Madera companies. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thanks for being here. I look forward to this. Please reach out to me. We'll put my email in this. If you need anything, we want to make you the most successful person and employee for the Madera companies that we can. You guys have a good day.